On a warm July evening in 1940, Hermann Göring stood before his staff and declared that the Royal Air Force would be wiped from the skies in a matter of weeks. He had promised Hitler that his Luftwaffe could deliver air superiority over Britain in 4 days, and total collapse of British resistance in 4 months. To the German High Command, the plan appeared inevitable. France had fallen, the British Expeditionary Force had barely escaped, and the island now stood alone. But across the Channel, a different kind of war machine was being assembled, not of numbers but of systems, coordination, and endurance. Britain's survival depended not on matching the Luftwaffe plane for plane, but on building a defense that could see first, think faster, and strike precisely. The Dowding system, named after Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, was already in place. A network that combined radar stations, observer posts, and centralized command rooms into one living organism. It turned every blip on a screen and every sighting report into instant intelligence. While Göring's air fleets relied on heroics and mass sorties, Dowding's fighters would move like chess pieces, guided by unseen eyes along the southern coast. When the first German reconnaissance planes crossed the Channel in early July, they met little resistance. It gave the illusion of British weakness. In truth, those flights were being tracked, timed, and catalogued, their routes recorded in chalk on plotting tables deep beneath Fighter Command's headquarters at Bentley Priory. Dowding refused to waste aircraft in scattered dogfights. He waited, measuring patterns, studying formations, and preserving strength for when the real assault came. That assault began in earnest on July 10, 1940. The Luftwaffe launched its first coordinated attacks on Channel convoys, hoping to draw the RAF out. It was a tactical rehearsal for a much larger storm. German pilots returned confident, boasting of dozens of British fighters destroyed. In reality, most of the losses had been shipping, not aircraft. The RAF's core fighter strength remained intact, its squadrons rotating quietly from base to base, learning the enemy's rhythm. By mid-July, German radio propaganda was already broadcasting victory speeches, promising invasion once the last British fighter had fallen. But those words echoed over an island that was neither defeated nor blind. Every raid, every approach was being watched. The Luftwaffe believed it was preparing to crush a disorganized defense. Instead, it was flying straight into a coordinated trap, one that would grind down its strength day by day, sortie by sortie. And as the summer skies over southern England began to fill with contrails, the battle that would decide the future of Europe was about to begin. The true weapon of the Royal Air Force in 1940 wasn't a single aircraft. It was information. Britain's chain-home radar network stretched along the coastline like a line of sentinels, each tower scanning the skies as far as the French coast. They were crewed by modern standards, capable only of detecting range and bearing, not altitude. But when combined with the human element, ground observers, plotting officers, and the calm voices inside Fighter Command, they became a predictive machine of war. Every signal intercepted by radar was converted into movement on a plotting table, where women of the WAAF, Women's Auxiliary Air Force, shifted colored markers to represent incoming raids. Controllers watched, calculated, and issued orders within seconds. The system allowed Dowding to direct his fighters with precision, launching only the squadrons needed for each threat. It conserved men and machines, ensuring that when the critical moments arrived, the RAF would never be caught exhausted. The Luftwaffe, however, had no idea such a network existed. Göring's intelligence staff dismissed British radar towers as radio masts. Early German pilots reported strange steel structures along the coast, but their importance was ignored. Instead, German planning focused on the destruction of airfields and aircraft factories, targets that seemed tangible, logical, and decisive. Yet every time German bombers crossed the Channel, RAF squadrons were already climbing to intercept, as if the British had read their plans. This uncanny timing began to unsettle the Luftwaffe's confidence. Pilots complained that the British seemed to appear out of nowhere, striking from above and vanishing into cloud. Göring suspected spies or luck, unaware that the real explanation lay in a small concrete building in Uxbridge, where Air Vice Marshal Keith Park commanded No. 11 Group. His operations room was the nerve center of the Southern defense. Linesmen shouting bearings, telephones ringing, and the great plotting table alive with colored blocks marking friend and foe. Above it all, Park's eyes never left the moving lines. At his command, sectors would scramble squadrons from Biggin Hill, Hornchurch, or Tangmere. Sometimes they intercepted too early, sometimes too late, but more often than not, they arrived exactly where they were needed. The Luftwaffe's plan to lure the RAF into scattered combat was failing. Instead, Britain was fighting with efficiency that multiplied its limited strength. In the skies above the English Channel, Hurricanes and Spitfires formed tight circles of defense, striking at bombers before their escorts could react. It wasn't just courage, it was coordination, a national nervous system operating faster than the invader's hand. The Germans soon realized that Britain's defenses couldn't be overwhelmed by speed alone. To defeat the RAF, they would need to break the network that made such precision possible. And by August, Göring's attention turned to a new target, the radar towers themselves. On August 13, 1940, the German High Command launched what they called Adlertag Eagle Day. It was to be the decisive blow, the beginning of the operation that would sweep the RAF from the skies and open the way for invasion. Göring's voice carried confidence as he promised Hitler that by the end of the month, the British fighter force would cease to exist. Across occupied Europe, airfields buzzed with activity. Waves of bombers and fighters, Heinkels, Dorniers, Messerschmitts, lined up on the runways of France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. But from the very first sorties, the plan unraveled. The Luftwaffe's operations depended on timing, coordination, and clear weather, three things the Channel seldom offered at once. Morning fog delayed launches, and miscommunication between air groups led to overlapping attacks. Some bombers reached the wrong targets. Others arrived hours apart instead of minutes. What was meant to be a single, overwhelming hammerblow landed instead as scattered strikes. On Britain's coast, the radar stations detected the incoming formations hours before the first bombs fell. Controllers at Fighter Command's Group HQ watched the plots multiply, each cluster of dots a formation of bombers heading for the south. Within minutes, orders were relayed. Squadrons from Tangmere and Kenley were scrambled, climbing to intercept. What followed over southern England was chaos in the clouds. German formations, confident of surprise, were met by disciplined attacks from Hurricanes and Spitfires. The British pilots fought in pairs, striking from the sun and diving through bomber formations before circling back into cover. By the end of the day, the Luftwaffe claimed they had destroyed more than 70 British fighters. In reality, only 13 were lost. German bombers, on the other hand, fell in alarming numbers. Among the chaos, one pilot story would capture the spirit of the RAF. Flight Lieutenant James Nicholson of No. 249 Squadron engaged a formation of Ju-88 bombers. His cockpit caught fire after being hit, but before bailing out, he saw one of the bombers turning away below him. Despite the flames engulfing his legs, Nicholson stayed at the controls long enough to destroy it, then leapt from his burning Spitfire. He survived, terribly injured, and later received the Victoria Cross, the only RAF fighter pilot to do so during the battle. That same day, German intelligence reported inflated success rates, convincing Göring that his plan was working. But beneath the surface, the truth was very different. The RAF was bloodied but intact, its radar network still operational, its squadrons rotating in and out of battle with mechanical precision. The Luftwaffe, believing victory was near, had walked straight into a battle of attrition it could not win. And as August wore on, the skies above southern England became the most dangerous airspace in the world. By mid-August, the battle had settled into a brutal rhythm. Every morning, radar screens at Chain Home began to flicker with new contacts, each blip representing a German formation leaving the French coast. By midday, the channel was filled with smoke trails and the distant thunder of engines. And by evening, the airfields of southern England were littered with wreckage, some British, far more German. The Luftwaffe shifted its tactics again and again, trying to find a weakness in Dowding's defense. First came attacks on convoys, then on coastal airfields. When those failed, Göring ordered direct assaults on the RAF sector stations, the nerve centers of Fighter Command's control system. Kenley, Biggin Hill, and Tangmere were hit repeatedly, their runways cratered and operations rooms shattered. On the ground, Mechanics and WAF operators worked under fire to keep communication lines open, repairing damage even as bombers circled overhead. For the young pilots, the pace was relentless. Many flew 4 or 5 sorties a day, often landing to refuel and rearm only to be sent back into the air within minutes. Losses mounted on both sides. Between August 24th and 31st, Britain lost over 200 fighters, but the Luftwaffe lost nearly 300 aircraft in the same period. The difference was in what those losses meant. Every British pilot who bailed out over home soil could fight again. Every German shot down became a prisoner of war. In Berlin, Göring demanded explanations. He could not understand how the RAF still fought with such coordination after so many claimed victories. His generals assured him the enemy was nearly defeated. In reality, Dowding's command system was still functioning, barely but effectively. Even when sector stations were destroyed, temporary operations rooms took over. Information continued to flow, squadrons continued to launch. Britain's resilience wasn't just in its pilots. It was in its organization, its ability to absorb punishment and keep fighting. On the ground, civilians watched the skies as if following a great unseen chess match. The sound of approaching engines sent entire towns running for shelter, while children counted contrails through gaps in the clouds. Churchill visited airfields during these weeks, shaking hands with exhausted pilots who looked far older than their years. After one visit, he turned to his aides and said quietly, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few." By early September, the Luftwaffe had failed to break fighter command. Their bombers were still being intercepted before reaching critical targets. Fuel reserves were stretched, morale faltered, and German intelligence continued to misread the data. Göring needed a new strategy, one that would crush British morale directly. His next decision would change the course of the entire battle. Frustrated by the failure to destroy fighter command, Hitler approved a new strategy. On the night of September 7, 1940, the Luftwaffe changed targets, from airfields to London itself. The first great raid began just before dusk. Nearly 350 bombers escorted by over 600 fighters swept up the Thames toward the city. Warehouses, docks, and entire neighborhoods vanished beneath sheets of flame. Civilians died by the hundreds, their homes turned to ash. Göring believed that by attacking the heart of Britain, he would finally shatter morale and draw the RAF into reckless defense. But that shift, born of rage and miscalculation, proved to be his undoing. For the first time in weeks, fighter commands, airfields, and radar stations were given a reprieve. Maintenance crews rebuilt, exhausted pilots rested, and new squadrons arrived from the north. The pressure that had nearly broken the system eased just enough for Dowding's men to recover. In the skies, the British now fought with renewed strength. When the bombers came, they were met with coordinated fury. September 15th became the decisive day. Early that morning, radar stations detected 2 massive waves of enemy aircraft crossing the channel, nearly 1,000 planes in total. Churchill, visiting the underground operations room at Uxbridge, watched as controllers moved colored blocks across the plotting table. Every squadron in southern England was scrambled. Over London, the battle became a storm of smoke and sunlight. Bombers pressed forward in tight formations, their gunners firing blindly as Spitfires and Hurricanes tore through their ranks. To observers on the ground, it seemed the entire sky was alive with motion. By afternoon, the second wave had arrived and met the same fate. When it ended, over 60 German aircraft had been destroyed. The Luftwaffe had suffered its worst day of losses so far. That evening, Göring sat in silence as reports came in. His staff had expected victory. Instead, they faced proof that the RAF not only survived, but was stronger than ever. Hitler postponed Operation Sea Lion indefinitely. The invasion of Britain would never happen. In 4 months of combat, the Luftwaffe had lost 1,977 aircraft, fighters, bombers, and reconnaissance planes, many of them the most experienced crews in Germany's air arm. The RAF had paid a high price too, with over 900 fighters lost and hundreds of pilots killed. Yet Britain remained unbroken. The battle ended not with a surrender, but with endurance. The quiet strength of systems, coordination, and willpower outlasting brute force, Britain's victory in the air wasn't just courage. It was calculation, coordination, and quiet defiance. If you want to uncover more untold stories of World War II strategy and survival, make sure to subscribe and join us for the next chapter.